Sponsored by Brilliant. Rumor has it Apple will be releasing not 3 new iPhones like last year, not even 4 new iPhones, but a whopping 5 new iPhones in 2020. Sure, it's nothing compared to the 879 new phones Samsung will likely release this year, but for Apple, it's a lot. Like a lot. So, why? I'm Rene Ritchie, and this is Vector. When Steve Jobs announced the original iPhone, it was just that, the original iPhone. There were variations in storage size, but not in the original iPhone itself. It was literally meant to be one iPhone for everyone. Well, except for the price. It started at $499 for 4 gigabytes. Now, 13 years later, rumor has it we'll be getting upwards of 5 new iPhones, and at the widest price range ever. iPhone 9 at $399 for people who want a less expensive iPhone that still has a home button. iPhone 12 quote-unquote mini for $649 or $699 for people who want a smaller but still modern iPhone. iPhone 12 for $699 or $749 for people who just want the new iPhone. iPhone 12 Pro for $999 or maybe even $1049 if 5G just blows up the pricing for people who want the new iPhone with all the new bells and whistles. And iPhone 12 Pro Max for $1099 or maybe even $1149 for people who just want the new iPhone with all the new bells and whistles and the biggest display and battery possible. So how did we get here from there? I'm going to ignore storage tiers for this just to keep it simple, but that original $499 iPhone was cost corrected quickly, giving people 8 gigabytes instead of 4, and making a deal with AT&T to subsidize the second generation iPhone 3G down to $199 for 8 gigabytes. Full price went back to $599 though, but few people ever saw or sought that. Then, when Apple introduced the third generation iPhone 3GS, it kept the same $199 subsidized and $599 unsubsidized price, but this time for 16 gigabytes. But did something else interesting as well. It decided to address a more entry-level market for the first time as well. Not by introducing a less expensive model, but by keeping the previous iPhone 3G on sale for $999 subsidized. $499 unsubsidized. There was still only one new iPhone a year, though Apple added color options, black and white, but Apple had added a pricing option as well. When the 4th generation iPhone 4 rolled around, Apple was facing a world where almost everyone in the US who wanted an iPhone and was willing to stay or switch to AT&T to get it had gotten it, and to continue to grow, Apple had to add other additional carriers. So about 7 months later, the first Verizon iPhone 4 launched. Everything stayed almost the same though with the 5th generation iPhone 4S, though now with both GSM for AT&T and International and CDMA for Verizon and eventually Sprint. But while the subsidized price stayed at $199 for 16 gigabytes, the unsubsidized price increased to $649. But with each new model, Apple kept keeping around the previous model for $100 less, until the 7th generation iPhone 5S. Whether the iPhone 5 and its chamfered edges were just too expensive to produce at a discount, Apple wasn't certain 64-bit and Touch ID, or even the first gold finish were enough differentiation, the smartphone market and iPhone markets were maturing and the company simply wanted to test a different strategy, or, yes, some of all of the above. When the iPhone 5S was introduced, the iPhone 5 was discontinued, and the iPhone 5C was launched not as a price drop, but as a new, less expensive iPhone in its place. Instead of another glass and metal premium blockbuster like the iPhone 5S, one that debuted in the fall, spiked over the holidays, and then slowly declined until the next fall saw the next blockbuster, with the iPhone 5C, Apple tried something more unabashedly plastic, in fun pop art colors, meant to be more like a TV show that sat on the shelf and sold for an entire season. Unfortunately, the iPhone 5C was new in candy coating only. The processor and camera was still the previous year's, and while the colors popped, the sales did not. Still, it was the first time Apple expanded into making 2 new iPhones at a time. And that's what companies do over time. They segment. They try to find a large enough group of potential customers that aren't buying or paying as much as they might, and they try to make a product that's more appealing to that group. It's why there are so many different kinds of cars and TVs. It's why Apple eventually made 4 different kinds of iPods and half a dozen different kinds of Macs. And it's also why the next year, with the 8th generation iPhone 6, Apple did it again. This time not with plastic and metal, less expensive and premium, but with double metal and premium, and something else new, big and bigger. See, Android phones had been swelling for years. Apple had gotten a little bigger with the iPhone 5, but nothing compared to the Android behemoths of the time. And what's better than owning almost all the profit in the premium market for 4-inch phones and under? Owning almost all the profit in premium markets for phones 4 inches and over as well. It also allowed Apple to introduce a third price point. Instead of $100 less expensive, this time it was $100 more expensive. $299 subsidized for 16 gigabytes, $749 unsubsidized. That done, Apple turned its attention back to the less expensive market. Instead of making a plastic iPhone 6C to sit next to the iPhone 6S though, Apple decided to kill two markets with one product. See, some people, some very premium people, didn't like the big and bigger iPhones. They still wanted a smaller iPhone, but not one like the 5C, not one with previous generation specs that compromised on performance and camera. One with the latest specs and all the performance and all the camera. So Apple went back to the iPhone 5 platform and made the iPhone SE, and it had almost all the latest features of the iPhone 6S, but the smaller size many still loved. What's more, because the iPhone 5 platform had been all paid down, Apple could still offer the iPhone SE for less, $399 for 16 gigabytes. It satisfied both the less expensive and the smaller iPhone markets, and even Apple underestimated demand for it initially. What's more, when you added the iPhone SE to the 10th generation iPhone 7 and iPhone 7 Plus, even with the former staggered 6 months before the two latters, Apple proved it could produce 3 new iPhones in a year. The iPhone 7 remains $649 now, but for 32 gigabytes of storage. But the iPhone 7 Plus with its extra camera went up an extra $20 to $769. It remained a bestseller though, showing that there was a higher end market for higher end features. All of those things would come into play the very next year when Apple not only announced 3 new iPhone models, but did so at the same time and with an all new model on top of all of them. The 11th generation iPhone 8 and iPhone 8 Plus were joined by the 12th generation iPhone 10. And not only did the iPhone 8 jump $50 to $699 for 64 gigabytes, the iPhone 8 Plus $30 to $799. The iPhone 10 dropped in at a whopping $999. Apple thought that if it brought new technologies forward, even if it cost more to make and sell, there'd be a market for it, even over the existing premium models. And despite a lot of naysaying and flat-out doomsaying, they were right. So the next year, they amped it up even more. Instead of 2 traditional flagships and a higher-end modern model, Apple went for 2 higher-end modern models, with the iPhone XS and the iPhone XS Max for $1099. Then, Apple did a partial iPhone 5C play and slid a new, less expensive model underneath it, the iPhone XR for $749 for 64 gigabytes. It was colorful, but it wasn't compromised like the 5C was. The XR had the latest processor and main camera. But there was still an optics problem. Where the iPhone X was seen as an extra, above and beyond, the XS was seen as just the next iPhone. And at $999, it was also seen as out-of-touch expensive. Even the iPhone XR, which was seen as less expensive, was $50 more than the iPhone 8 had been. And that created a lot of negative press and sentiment, especially during a time when the overall smartphone market was reaching saturation and China especially was struggling. So, last year, Apple switched gears again. Still 3 new iPhones, still at the same time, but this time they gave the iPhone 11 no modifier name to the base model and carefully rebranded the higher end models to iPhone 11 Pro and iPhone 11 Pro Max. What's more, Apple brought that base model pricing back down to $699 for 64 gigabytes and only $749 for 128 gigabytes. And because perception is everything, the market proved much, much happier, especially after the highest profile competition came in at more expensive. Now, this year, it sounds like Apple is going to take pages from many of its previous playbooks, but with some new twists. First, in the spring, a next-generation iPhone SE, maybe called the iPhone 9, that instead of being less expensive and smaller, will be less expensive and still have a home button. An iPhone 8 body with, hopefully, iPhone 11 brains, and once again, hopefully at $399. Then, 2 regular-priced iPhones, the iPhone 12, one the same size as the iPhone XR and iPhone 11 right now, and the other slightly smaller again, meant to appeal to people for whom current iPhones are just physically too big. Basically, a way to satisfy the other half of the iPhone SE market, the small but premium market, maybe at the same $699, but hopefully even for a little less. We'll have to wait and see where Apple thinks the make it up in volume pricing really is. Taken together, the iPhone 9 and smaller iPhone 12 would provide a pretty compelling, fairly complete answer for people who want smaller iPhones, both traditional with the home button, but also the new modern design. And at the top end, the iPhone 12 Pro might move to the same size as the iPhone XR and 11, and the iPhone 12 Pro Max even bigger. Part of that, no doubt, to support the extra power and battery needed for millimeter wave 5G. See my previous video. But it might also let Apple again explore even higher price points and display sizes for people who use their iPhone as their primary computer and literally want the biggest screen possible, like a tiny tablet. Yes, please. It could still be $999 and $1099, or the 5G and size bump could put them up to $1049 and $1149, or even $1099 and $1199 respectively. Either way, that's an incredible spread of new iPhone models and price points. Sure, it'll take launching one new iPhone in the spring and an unprecedented 4 new iPhones in the fall, but it's something Apple has been preparing for the better part of the last decade. And again, it's what happens in a mature market. It's what happened with the iPod, the Mac, even the iPad. And Apple is starting to be able to do that at iPhone scale, which is pretty much the biggest scale imaginable in consumer electronics. If the rumors are true, and if Apple has gotten its market segmentation and demand forecasting just right. And if not, there's always Brilliant. I mean, just check out the new Algorithm Fundamentals course. You start with simple drag and drop exercises to get you thinking like a computer scientist about conditionals, loops, arrays, and how to put them together into common algorithms for searching and sorting. Brilliant is a problem-solving based website and app with a hands-on approach with over 60 interactive courses in math, science, and computer science. It puzzles you, surprises you, and expands your understanding of the modern world. And all of Brilliant's courses have storytelling, code writing, interactive challenges, and problems to solve. The best thing you can do in 2020 is invest in your STEM skills. So go to brilliant.org/vector and finish your day a little smarter every day. Thanks, Brilliant, and thanks to all of you for supporting the show. So that's my even more specific predictions for Apple's 2020 iPhone lineup. But now I want to hear your predictions. Hit like if you do, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell gizmo so YouTube will actually let you know when future shows go live. Then hit up the comments and let me know, which new iPhones do you think Apple will release this spring and this fall? Thanks for watching. See you next video.